Bonus credit. Add a delete button to each list item that removes it from the list. So here's where we create the item. We already add spans for each property. And now we want to add a button besides. So you could just create it here if you wanted. Add a delete button. How about const delete button equals document dot create element button delete button dot text content equals, let's put del or delete or whatever you want to say, and item dot append child delete button, something like that. See what happens. There we go. I got a button there now, right? Doesn't do anything yet, but one thing at a time. If you don't know how to make the button work, you at least know how to make the button. So just make the button. This all makes sense? It's just one more thing that we want to stick in the item when we make the item. Add a delete button. We know how to make a button. Document.create element. We know how to change the text inside an element. We use text content. So no new tricks in here yet, right? Now we're going to add more buttons later, so maybe we want this whole thing to be a separate function. I don't know. Up to you. All right, so we need something to happen when you click it, though, right? So we need to add an event listener. We can add an event listener to something that we haven't even added to the DOM yet. No problem. So let's just say delete button dot add event listener. And we're waiting for it to be clicked, right? So the event is click. What's going to happen? Well, we haven't written this function yet, but something like this dot remove flick. No, they say dress for the job you want, not the job you have. Or maybe no one's ever said that to you. Someone said that to me once. Well, write for the function you want, not the function you have. We don't have this dot remove flick yet, but this is how I would like it to work. So I'm just gonna pretend it's there for right now. Okay, I'm done pretending. I'm gonna make it now. All right, here we go. Remove flick. Where should we put it? I'll put it underneath here. Why not? So remove flick. Just another method. So it's going to be pass an event, right? Because it's an event handler. So it doesn't mean you have to do anything with it, but it's there. We don't need to prevent default. It's just a generic button. But we could always get the target from there. What would the target be? No, not quite. So the button, the target of an event is always the DOM element on which the event occurred. So the button, right? Okay, what good does that do us? Did anybody take advantage of that knowledge to delete the thing from the UI? Is she the only one who did it that way? Let's see. Who else had delete working? I saw more than that. Yeah. What'd you do, Evelyn? How'd you make delete work? But how did you find the parent that you wanted to remove it from?
I made it inside my handy somewhat, so I don't really have to.
Okay. Okay, she already had the list item. Okay, gotcha. Well, hey, I suppose we could do that too. What if we just, so there's several ways we could do this. What if, Troy, did you do it differently?
I'm sorry, I kind of zoned out completely.
Okay. The question was just how'd you do? Yeah, what'd you do?
Are we talking about the dot parent element?
That's one way. Yeah. So the parent element of what? Would you?
I did ev dot target dot parent element.
Okay. Oh, so you did.
The list item.
Okay. So if the event target is the button, right? Then you can try to find. Thing is to remove it from the page. What you probably found is that you need to remove it from the parent, right? You can't just remove it for some silly reason. That's just how it works. It's remove child, right? So since the method is remove child, that means you have to know what the parent is. So we have to find the list item, right? The list item is where the button or where the I'm sorry, you have to have the list itself, right? So we could try to get the list available inside this function. So like what Aveline was saying was if this is all inside handle submit, you've already got the list. So that takes care of that. But another thing you could do, if event target is the button, you could say parent node, parent element, what'd you do? Parent element dot remove child, and then pass it the list item if you had the list item here. Something like that. Let's see. Let's try another thing. So the list, there's only one list, right? We grab it every time we run handle submit, but it's the same list for the entire lifetime of the app. So maybe grabbing it off the page over and over doesn't make sense. What if we instead did this? What if inside the constructor we just said this dot list and grab it like that? Then down in handle submit, we would just say this dot list append child. So that would give us the list inside here too. And then what we need to remove is not the button, right? It's the list item. So this thing. Are you with me so far? How now I'm grabbing the list up here in the constructor and actually storing it as a property of the app object itself. See what I'm doing? So this dot list is document query selector flicks. So instead of grabbing it and handle submit every time, because it never changes, I just grab it once at the beginning and just keep reusing it. And in addition to saving us from having to run query selector over and over, it means that it's also available inside remove flick now. So does that part make sense? So then what I really want to do is remove the list item. But how do I know which list item it is? Well, that's how I could use event target parent, right? Because the parent of the button is the list item. So that totally works. But what if I wrote my markup like this? You don't need to copy this. This is just demonstration. What if I had the list item, then I had my spans, then I had like a div with a class of actions, and I had my button inside there. Then the parent is this, right? And its parent is the li. I'd like to be able to nest this as deeply as I like without having to worry about how many steps up the tree. So if we could write it in such a way that that didn't matter, it'd be cool to write it that way. And there are a couple of different ways we could do that. So here's one way. What if, right here we have the item. The item is right here inside render item. So what if we could just pass it as an argument to remove flick? Can we? How might you do that? If I wanted to actually send item as an argument to remove flick, how might I rewrite line 37? Yeah.
You put the call to remove flick in like an anonymous function.
Yeah, what if I make my actual event handler an anonymous function that calls remove flick, then I can pass in whatever arguments I want. Right? Get it? So we're not the ones calling whatever the event handler is. You could still make it pass some arguments if you wanted, but we won't get into that right now. But if you just put an anonymous function in here and have it call your method, then you're good. Also, that takes care of the whole this thing, right? The way I had it written so far, it actually would have broken because of this. But the arrow function takes care of that situation. So let's just see that much. Let's go back to just putting this.remove flick in here. And let's just console log this.list. That should totally work, right? Undefined. Right? This.list isn't defined inside remove flick because this is the wrong thing in remove flick, right? So to fix that, we could make an arrow function here, right? Well, then I should put this back. We used this trick yesterday. So now that does give me my list. Right? Remember that? So because remove flick was acting as the event handler, this was bound to the wrong thing by default. But if it's not the event handler, and we actually call it as a method by saying this dot remove flick open close parens, then this will be bound to whatever was to the left of the dot when we called it. But to do that, we need to make an anonymous function actually serve as our event handler. And we saw that if we used the old function syntax, we would still have the same problem with this. But using an arrow function takes care of that. So it's just a pattern you have to get used to. Follow at least kind of, or can you get used to this pattern? How do we feel about this? I don't think we like it. Well, so that solves one problem. That solves the binding of this, but it also lets us pass arguments into remove flick if we want to, because we've got a parentheses right here. So I could just actually pass the list item in there. So then, in remove flick, I can get to the actual list, the UL, from this.list. Then I could say remove child. And which child is it? It's the item. So now I'm no longer getting the event inside here, right? The event is going inside my arrow function, and I'm not doing anything with it. Sometimes you'll see people do this. If you have an argument that you're not using, just put an underscore in front of the name. That way you kind of remind yourself that argument is there, I'm just not doing anything with it. So you could do something like that if you wanted to, just kind of a note to yourself. That's a common pattern. So then I could say this list remove child item, I think. So Black Hat, Hemsworth. Deleted. Makes sense? At least a little bit of sense? So the new DOM method we have to use is remove child. So to remove the child, we have to have both the thing we want to remove, which is the list item, and the thing we're removing it from, which is the actual list, the UL. So I just saved the list on the object itself in the constructor, and then I pass the item in as a child. And this is, by the way, Dana, totally not how I've ever done it in previous. I'm doing it totally differently this time. Yeah. The underscore. So now the arrow function here is going to get the event as an argument, right? Because it's the actual event handler. So I just named it with because I'm not doing anything with the event. I'm not getting the target. I'm not preventing default or anything. I could just not put it inside parentheses. It would still get passed. So sometimes if you want to just kind of make a note that there is an argument being passed in, but you're not using it, you can just put an underscore in front of its name. Just because you can name it whatever you want, right? I can name it pancakes, and it would still be an event. But if you just, it's kind of a convention to put an underscore in front of the name if you're not going to use the variable. And there are some code checking things like ESLint that will that complain at you if you have variables that you don't use. But if you precede the name with an underscore, it'll ignore them, because that was already kind of a convention that was established in the community. Yeah.
Just a general question about the advent listener. Does the second parameter have to be a function?
Yes.
So you can't like replace it with an HTML expression or something?
No. Nope. Second argument to add event listener has to be a function. It can be an anonymous function, but it has to be a function. If I tried to, like if I tried to just put this in there, like just an expression, well, in that case, yeah, it's not so happy about this, because it's trying to run this here and that doesn't even make sense. But what if I just put console log? And then try the button. Nothing's happening. It's not even logging it again, because now I just set it to undefined. Let's start remove flag. Okay, it works. All right, we good for the moment? Remove flicks from the UI. But not from the array yet.